Yeah. So, hi again, Jacques. I'm with Kentic as a solution engineer, and I'm going to present about the biggest incidents that we've seen on the internet. This is actual work from a colleague of mine. He used to be part of the BTEC group, and he wrote an extensive report about all the incidents that were seen in routing security. There's a blog published on Kentic's website, and it's also being translated in Spanish, but I don't think we have any Spanish people here. So let's go through that history of incidents, and why are those incidents problematic? You know, they cause disruptions, they cause services to be not available, just general pain from a lot of users of the internet. The other incident, the other problematic reason is misdirection of traffic, and that might even be more problematic because that will give others the opportunity to inspect your traffic, to maybe see what you are doing, and maybe you were just doing a payment and they now have your payment details and stuff like that. So there's, you know, it has a big impact and has a big effect if that error or that issue with BGP has happened or is happening. So let's throw through that history. You know, there's a lot of types of incidents. There's a lot of type of the scale of the incidents could be large, and you know, we have the ones that we made the mistake in the configuration and we say, I should never have done this. But it could also be much more difficult to solve and to figure out what exactly happened. So until a few years ago, we could not do a lot about this as well, and that made it even harder to work against those incidents and to prevent those incidents to happen. So when we speak about disruptions, we often talk about leaks, routing leaks. But what is a routing leak? And we have a definition. There's an IETF RFC that, you know, goes into a lot of detail about that definition. But basically it drills down to that a routing leak is the propagation of a routing announcement beyond their intended scope. So somebody is announcing a prefix that should not be announced from that network, or is changing the AS path. So there's there's something in the middle that should not be there. And then we're talking about an origination leak or an adjacency leak. So the origination is a prefix should be advertised from the one network, but is advertised from another network. That's where the origination goes wrong. And the adjacency is when there's a network in the AS path that should not be there. So a couple of examples of those origin leaks and disruption due to leaks, some of the origin leaks. So the AS number that should originate the prefix is not the one that has been seen in the routing table. And that goes back to before I started working in this industry. It took me another 2 years before I came into this world. But in 1997, there was this first major disruption caused by a routing leak or a routing leak. There was a software bug that caused the router to originate a lot of the global routing table. And you know, you can imagine what happens then, that you know, when someone starts announcing all those prefixes with this AS number, all that traffic will be redirected, or at least if you are the preferred route on top of the other routes. And after that, a lot of other similar incidents happened. There's the Turk Telecom leak in 2004. China Telecom did a similar thing in 2010. Telecom Malaysia did a similar thing in 2015. And there's many, many more. And there's an extensive report, as said, written by Doug Midori, that goes into a lot of detail about these leaks. But they had one thing in common, and that was that they all used their own network ASN as the origin, so they were all attracting traffic to their network. Some of that was intentional, but also accidental. The Pakistan incident, where they tried to stop their citizens watching a particular YouTube video, and I'm not sure why it was a Dutchman, that posted that video, but at least the Pakistani government didn't want their citizens to watch that video. So they ordered Pakistan Telecom to block the traffic to YouTube. But what accidentally happened is that they created more specific routes. Those routes, they attracted traffic. But what accidentally happened is that those routes were advertised to their upstreams. So that caused not only their own citizens connected to Pakistan Telecom to prevent watching that video, but it caused a lot of other users wanting to reach YouTube to not being able to reach that, because routing is following the shortest path and the most specific prefix. So all that traffic was diverted to Pakistan Telecom, which basically rendered that YouTube was not able to, you were not able to reach YouTube in that case. And that happened more. It's not only that accident in Pakistan, but there's also for Twitter that happened a couple of times during the military coups in 2021 in Myanmar, 2022 when there was a Russian thing going on. But there was a slight difference, and that is that Twitter had set up RPKI, and we've been talking about RPKI before today, but they were able to mitigate the incident that was happening just by having set up RPKI. So we talked about a couple of examples for that origin leaks, and then there's the adjacency leaks, where people start ingesting their own network in the AS path, either on purpose to, intercept the traffic or by accident. So there was a leak in November 2018 where Main One passed a couple of routes to their transit providers. China Telecom carried those routes towards the internet, and Google and Cloudflare were among the disrupted networks. In that situation, there were prefixes announced with a path that is not the path that it should be. There was a network involved that should not carry that traffic. Similar thing in June 2019, where about 29,000 routes were leaked from one provider to another. And in this case, it was a route optimizer. An appliance that looks at your traffic and tries to optimize your connectivity, and was trying to optimize your connectivity by advertising a lot more specifics to steer the traffic in the way that it should be. But those prefixes got announced to the global internet, more specifics to the global internet, from a network that should not advertise those. So that network started to receive that traffic, rendering either that network impossible to reach, or any of the users being able to look at the traffic that was there. And Cloudflare was one that took the biggest hit for this one. But the origins were intact, so how do we stop this from happening? How can we make sure that your prefixes are being advertised over the correct AS path from the right origin? How do we do that? So in the media, it is said that the bridging gap protocol is hopeless. And this is how much people know about the internet. If you're on Sky News and people say and start explaining about outages, and they talk about BGP, and then they talk about the bridging gap protocol. I mean, I hope we're all we all understand what's going on here, and that the media sometimes is completely wrong. But anyways, it is BGP that we should look at. And are they right? Is it hopeless? Well, is it hopeless? Are we actually doing a better job? Are we making the same mistakes as ever? Did you ever, configured a routing policy that accidentally leaked a route, yes or no? You've been testing it, maybe you've been automating it, Sander. But has it ever happened to you? So what can we do against this? There are technologies nowadays. There's RPKI, which is, we're making progress there. Those origin leaks, we can prevent those by using RPKI. Set up those ROAs, do the validation, set up your routing policies, and we see in the overview that there's many of those. This one is taken from NIST, where we can actually see how it's evolving, how the deployment of RPKI is evolving, where we see more and more valids, the green line is going up, and less invalid and unknown routes. Sorry, we see less unknown routes in the routing table, so less routes that are not being covered by a ROA. So that's actually going in the right direction. And a lot of the major tier 1 networks nowadays have set up their routing policy. So is RPKI actually reducing the propagation of invalid routes? Yes, it is. If we look at this graph, I explained it this morning as well. These graphs show the propagation of routes seen from the vantage points from route views. So the more vantage points, so the further on the right in the graph, the more vantage points see a prefix, the further it is propagated. So we can see that the not founds and the valid prefixes, the validated prefixes, that is propagating far over the internet. A lot of the vantage points, almost all of the vantage points, see those prefixes. The invalids, the green graph, there you can actually see that the majority of the prefixes are on the lower end side of the graph. That means that not all the vantage points see those prefixes. So that means that the propagation of those prefixes actually doesn't go as far as the RPKI valids or the RPKI not found prefixes. So that's a good thing. We are taking care of that global routing infrastructure. But it's not just RPKI. There's a lot that we can do to make sure that those incidents that I was describing earlier, that those don't happen. General improvements in your routing hygiene, your documentation in the routing registries, IRR filters, awareness, like the talks that I'm doing, like the talks that have been here today, and there's manners. That's a document, or basically a way of working, a way of operating your network with a lot of common practices, best practices, definitions on how to set up routing, how to set up filtering. It's a document that has been working on for a long time. I know that ISOC started that a couple of years ago. And it's something that's being adopted by more and more networks. That framework of best practices is being adopted by more and more networks. And one good example, for instance, is China Telecom, and we saw those in the incidents earlier. So they are not leaking any routes anymore because of the fact that they joined Manus, so they adhere to all those common practices. Otherwise, you can't join that group of networks that. So it's not just RPKI. So I want things to become common knowledge. we have to make sure that the majority of traffic is directed to RPKI valid routes. And we have to be sure and we have to be aware of the fact that if there are invalid routes, that route propagation is cut in half. So we are doing a good job. We should continue this good job. But that global routing system can be manipulated, and there will always be ways to redirect the internet traffic. We've only been looking at the source of your advertisements, the source, the originating network, and the prefixes coming from that network. So those leaks where we see a network in the middle, there's a lot of documentation, there's a lot of research being done on the misdirection of those communication. So actually hijacks of traffic. There's documentation about those man-in-the-middle attacks, descriptions about attacks and the effects and the things that happened after the attacks, where financial institutions were hit, foreign ministries were hit, and stuff like that. So what do we do against that, instead of being only able to validate that announcement, whether or not it comes from the right origin? What happens when you have that man-in-the-middle attack? How do we stop that? Well, maybe first a good example of that. There is an attack that was there in 2022, Cellerbridge. It is an organization that does cryptocurrency services. You can change one crypto for the other, and they take care of that. And you don't want to be, you don't want to have that there's someone in the middle of that changing your wallet address, for example. So your currency is not being transferred to that other wallet in that other currency, but it's being stolen from you. So how do we stop that? Let's skip to that. Oh, we have an example here. Let's go back one slide. So that Cellerbridge, that service to convert between the cryptocurrency, what they basically did was that redirect of the attacker's wallet. So any currency that was being converted was being transferred to the attacker's wallet. So that, that's very profitable. But why was this successful? It was successful because a additional AS path was AS number was being added into the freely available OldDB, which is a routing registry that anyone can use. So they just updated that, added a new AS number. So from a routing perspective, from a routing registry perspective, this AS path was actually okay. This was correct, but that couldn't be seen. So looking at the graph for that traffic, where it looked like the traffic was originated by that Amazon ASN, but that should not be the case. So we can actually see that malicious route was there for a while, and the legit route wasn't there for a while. So they were very, very successful with this. And that because of injecting a different AS number in the path and being that man in the middle. Can we stop these with RPKI? Now, well, they had a ROA for the originating AS number, very liberal ROAs. They used max length, so everything was there. Some prefixes were not, some prefixes were in, some were not, but the most important ones were in there. So can we prevent this? Actually, no, because the origin wasn't the one that was changed. It was the AS path, and we need something else for the AS path. And there is work being done on BGP SEC, which is a different method. to secure your AS, the BGP topology and the ASs that are advertising or leaking prefixes. So we should be able to do more. We must do more. We have our PKI. We're working on ASPA, where you can define your upstreams that are allowed to advertise your prefixes, so it doesn't look like a leak, because you just tell the system, well, this is a network that is allowed to advertise my prefixes. And there's BGP-SEC coming up, where we try to stop that man-in-the-middle attack. So we're moving the needle on routing security. Things are improving, but we're not there yet. We are halfway, and I hope that more and more people start working on this and start implementing the security measures that are out there, and start working on implementing the newer stuff that's coming up. So that's it, and I think there's time for questions.
Open up to the floor. Any questions? Thanks, Jack. Okay, just a bit of an agenda update. Up next we have peering personals, and then